This is The Guardian.
Hello, I'm Faye Carruthers and welcome to The Guardian Women's Football Weekly. We have an FA Cup winner in our midst. Manchester United's Aoife Mannion is with us to discuss their 4-0 Wembley win over Tottenham. We'll preview the final weekend in the WSL season with the title going down to the wire. And we now know it will be a fond farewell to Viv Miedema on Sunday as the WSL record breaker says her goodbyes to Arsenal. All that as well as a look at the England squad Serena Wiegman's announcing today. Plus we'll take your questions. And that's today's Guardian Women's Football Weekly. Women's Football Weekly is supported by Google Pixel, the only phone engineered by Google, an official mobile phone of Arsenal Football Club, Liverpool Football Club and the England teams. Google Pixel's working with the FA, Arsenal FC and Liverpool FC to close the visibility gap between men's and women's football with the formation of Pixel FC, a collective of next-generation creators and presenters dedicated to covering the women's game. They'll have exclusive access to players, additional resources and content creation opportunities to give women's football the visibility it deserves. Search Google Store to find out more. Well, what a panel. Oh, hang on. Just one panellist as we speak. Susie Wrack, hola, from Portugal. I was living vicariously through you on Sunday at Wembley. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I mean, in mourning, obviously, you know, about the news that we're going to get onto later that is going to set me off in tears at any single moment of the day. But other than that, great.
Yeah, I know. Oh dear. She's not died. She's still alive. She's just maybe not going to wear red. That's all. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Speaking of red, the Adobe Women's FA Cup has a new winner. History was made at Wembley on Sunday as Manchester United lifted the trophy for the first time. Mark Skinner's team put the ghosts of last year's heartbreak at the hands of Chelsea to bed with a comfortable victory over Tottenham. It finished 4-0 thanks to goals from Ella Toone, Rachel Williams and a brace from Lucia Garcia. Now, it wouldn't be quite as fun, no offence to you, Susie, of course, if we just analysed the game between us. So what we're going to do is give you a first-hand account instead from someone who actually had their hands on the trophy in the royal box. Not just that, though, wearing a bucket hat as well. Aoife Mannion, congratulations. Have you recovered?
Thank you so much. We're just absolutely over the moon. Have we recovered? I don't think we'll ever recover from a day like that. Creating history for the club. First time we've ever won the FA Cup. It's all the good stuff. Everything we thought it was going to be and more.
Can you talk us through that exact moment when the whistle blew? What were your emotions?
My emotions were pure relief. I think I said to the girls afterwards, when we beat Chelsea in the FA Cup final, because we've been holding on so tightly for so long, defending a 1-0 lead, when we won, it was like pure elation. There was like such intensity in the celebrations, but it was so hot in Wembley. And so when that whistle went, it was almost like a big sigh of relief that we'd managed to go one step that we'd ever done before. The celebration sort of launched after that almost. It was absolutely roasting. Everyone did so amazing. And then to be on that pitch was really special. Obviously, within that last few minutes, unless Spurs were going to score 4 goals in the space of a few minutes, then I've never been in that situation where it looked like it really was going to swing for us. But you just never let yourself believe that. So then when we got it over the line, it was incredible.
Listen, I'm going to ask you about the celebrations in a minute. But in terms of pre-match and going into it, Mark Skinner had said that he felt as a group that all of you were pretty grounded before the match and that last year's experience had been really crucial in terms of the foundation for your success. But when you look at the game as a whole, what do you think were the most important factors that saw you over the line? Was it pre-match or during?
Maybe a little bit of everything. I think being in the FA Cup final last year was a massive, massive help. The biggest thing is you're a little less overwhelmed by the occasion, walking out in front of that many fans. We didn't have that same level of nervousness, probably, as we did last year. We also have players on the team that have won the Euros at Wembley. Tooney, Mary, like people who have played in massive, massive moments at Wembley. I think all those little things add up. And then on the day, just players that have added a little bit of their own magic. Like, what a way to break the deadlock. Tooney's finish, absolute rocket. And I think the deflating thing, if I'm on the other side of that, is that I know it's not a one-off. I know that she can do things like that. And so all of these little things added up. We looked really, really strong on set pieces. Rachel Williams seemed to be attracting the ball like a honeypot. And so it kind of fell towards us as the game went on. But that wasn't to say that in the first half it was proper intense, really, really, really close. Spurs had lots of really good possession. And then once we broke that deadlock, it kind of came towards us a bit more.
It must have also been a really big moment for you personally, right? After all your injury battles over the last couple of seasons, that must have been a huge moment for you to be on the grass after all of that.
Yeah, it was a massive moment for me personally. I've had some really tricky injuries. The first part of this season, for example, I was out for sort of 5-6 months with a really kind of long, frustrating quad injury. And at that point, in the depths of that rehab, I would never have thought that it would be possible for me to necessarily be on the pitch, helping the team, create history for the club, winning our first FA Cup. So, yeah, there's that team experience with it being our first time, and then my sort of personal experience laid on top of that. It kind of makes it a little bit more sweeter. And probably if there's anything that I take away from it, it's just that football is such swings and roundabouts. It's like so up and down. We've had many moments this year where we've not been on that high that we would have wanted to, and then all of a sudden you're experiencing moments where you're winning an FA Cup final, and it's unprecedented for us as a club. And so I don't really know what to make of it all, other than to say that my nerves are absolutely tethered. So yeah, just trying to soak it all in, enjoy it, celebrate it with the girls, celebrate it with the family, and really appreciate that these moments are proper special.
Yeah, actually, Mark Skinner kind of talked a little bit about that, didn't he, in terms of living in the moment a little bit, which I suppose has been quite difficult this season. It's not been the easiest season at the club, as you mentioned there. Lack of consistency, perhaps a problem, a lot of noise outside in terms of the ownership. But how much could this win potentially give you the foundations to push on into the next year?
I think the win is massive for us because when we look back on this season, there is something to show for it. I think that the foundations are already with us. I think they're already there. That said, we all know that the season has not been as good as we would have wanted it to be. It's not matched the consistency that we had last year. And that's for us as players and staff to kind of reflect and really try and bridge that gap and take that next step. Obviously, last year was the first year where we qualified to get into the Champions League qualifying stage. And for example, we've not managed to do that this year. But right now, sort of still so close to sort of winning some silverware, it's hard to make sense of what the whole season sits up like. We're just soaking in how incredible it is to win silverware. And I think that winning something does make a difference to the feel of the season, and especially if it's at the end of the season. I think everyone would acknowledge that the season's been really up and down. But I think that if at the start of the season somebody had said, you're going to win the FA Cup, I think we would have took that and just ran with it. And so maybe we have to take a little bit of the rough with the smooth. But it's on us, obviously, to make sure that we bridge that gap.
And the season's not quite over yet, is it, in the league? I mean, obviously, not only do you get to go home to Old Trafford to celebrate this win with the fans there, but you've got a massive role in the title race as well when you play Chelsea. Like, how much are you looking forward to that as an occasion, being able to take that trophy to Old Trafford, but also then hopefully finish the season on a real high and play such a big role in what is quite a crucial game at the top of the table?
I think it would be really special always being at Old Trafford. This will be our second time this season, and so it's really important for us to just put on an entertaining performance and win regardless of who it is. And then on top of that, it's Chelsea. It's an incredible team. It's a really important game for them, for example. It's Emma Hayes' last game with Chelsea, so there's a lot of intensity around their last game. For us, that's not really something that will really kind of play into our preparations. We're just going to be thinking it's on us to finish the season on a feeling of as high as possible. And then obviously we'll have that FA Cup to kind of parade around, hopefully. But you're only as good as your last game. So we're kind of still in the aftermath of winning the FA Cup, but like everything, a few days later, not that it's all forgotten about, but it's just all about the next game. We're off today, but when we go back in tomorrow, it will just be all eyes on that and seeing if we can repeat what we did a few weeks ago, which was beat them for the first ever time in our history.
Yeah, I wish you lots of luck for that. And just a quick last question for you, because look, I know we talked about what's going on behind the scenes, and it's really difficult for you to comment as a player because I'm not sure how much of the changes that are being implemented you're seeing. But what's the feeling amongst the women's part of Manchester United about how things are moving forward and progressing?
I think this year we've seen so much change. This year has been the year where we've got some permanent facilities, incredible, like top of the range facilities at Carrington, which is where the men and the academy used to reside or still do reside, and it's where we are now and it's our home. And so that has been a massive, massive step forward. I think the players coming into the club are really, really exciting. Players of different nationalities from different continents, bringing different styles of play. And so really the ingredients are all there. That's the feeling. The ingredients are all there, and that's what makes it, at times, has been quite frustrating because we know that at our best, we can be really pushing higher up the league, for example. And so overall, I would say that the feeling is kind of like a determination. It's like a headiness. It's sort of when we can see where we want to go. Moments like winning the FA Cup give us that glimmer of where we believe we should be and we should be competing for. And it's our job, everyone involved at the club, to just keep pushing in that direction. And so I think it's always the case for the last 15 years in women's football that no matter what you've got in terms of facilities, in terms of resources, everything, you just want a bit more. And so there's that constant push. And at the same time then being able to appreciate how much things have changed and are changing. The women's side has only been newly created as a professional outfit since 2018, which is still quite new. But that doesn't stop us from pushing for more and more.
And why should you not push for more and more and absolutely everything that you deserve? How are the celebrations? And I hear that you were very excited in the mix zone with your gold medal. What are you going to do with it?
The celebrations were absolutely lovely, so wholesome. We had a massive room that we went back to with all of our friends and family, playing all of the old classic songs and everyone singing and just really enjoying it. It was really, really, really nice. Proper good stuff. And in the mix zone, yeah, I was really excited. And then whatever way I was holding my rucksack, I felt like I was on like a big kind of fan experience day out, and like people have kind of picked that up and obviously found that funny, which is nice because that's what it felt like. So I'm glad that, you know, in and amongst it all, there's that little bit of humour as well. And kind of just shows actually that as a team, we're not used to necessarily being in that experience. So it's like, it shows that kind of novelty in doing things for the first time and that human side.
Well, we love you as a human, as always. It's so lovely to see you, Aoife. I know you've got a day off and you've got 1,000,001 appointments to make, as is the case when you get a day off. It's never actually just going and chilling, is it? It's doing a load of life admin. So enjoy that. It's really lovely to see you. Congratulations again.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Huge thanks to Aoife, and our next guest is only coming on afterwards because, let's be fair, she is a bit fighty and we had to keep them apart. Our resident Spurs fan just isn't over it yet. It's far too raw. Chris Barros, how are you?
I'm all right, but yeah, you're right. I'm pleased I wasn't there with Aoife, to be fair. I've seen some of that social media and I don't think I could have handled it.
Did you not appreciate the bucket hat?
Do you know what? I didn't, funnily enough.
Oh, Chris, look, we're going to come on to the game shortly, but you've followed this Tottenham side for so many years. I know how gutted you were. Let's park the result, shall we? How special was the actual day at Wembley?
Do you know what? It was incredible. Spurs as a club really showed up, sort of on and off the pitch. You know, the Box Park was renamed Broxbourne Park. For those who don't know, Spurs Ladies, as it was previously Broxbourne Ladies. And then the women that set up Broxbourne persuaded the club to let them use the brand and the kit back in the early 90s. It was formed in 1985. And honestly, that Broxbourne Park was all kitted out for Spurs. You know, there was sort of livery everywhere, really sort of, you know, big pictures of the team up for the cup. Paul Coit, who does half-time at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, was on stage. A guy who's called the Voice of Spurs, who does loads of Spurs songs, was there with his guitar doing his stuff. It was fantastic. And the social media and all the content leading up to the final was incredible as well. The majority of the board were in attendance. You know, we really, really showed up. And we came, we saw, we didn't quite manage to conquer, but I feel like, you know, it was a really brilliant day. And I came away from it thinking, do you know what? Second out of 456 is pretty damn good. You know, and if you were in the Olympics, you wouldn't sniff at silver. So at the end of it all, with that moment of reflection, of course, it's really hard going to a final because you're excited, right? Like there's a massive build up. You get there on the day, the sun was shining, the stadium was full. We were there with all of our hopes, dreams and expectations, and we didn't quite manage to get over the line.
No, and I'm really gutted for you, especially because we were so excited speaking to Jenna Scalacci last week, and the hopes and dreams of any team going into an FA Cup final or any final at Wembley, to be honest. It's the hope that kills you sometimes, isn't it? And actually, Susie, Manchester United were deserved winners in the end, and I think that's probably where Spurs will be most disappointed that it wasn't close. But, you know, United found this breakthrough just before the break. Where did you see the match won and lost, and what was the atmosphere from the press box like?
Oh, the atmosphere was incredible. You know, it's sold out, but I think it was the first one where it was, for me, like massive ends, you know, of fans, and far fewer neutrals than you've got in previous years. And that's like the hangover, because obviously they start selling tickets as soon as the last cup finals finish pretty much for the next season, because between the semi-finals and the final there's not a huge gap of time to sell to fan bases. But we're sort of on the cusp of, I think, that transitioning. So the atmosphere, incredible, because we're sort of at a point where teams are able to bring huge numbers of fans to games like this now, whereas previously, you know, if we're talking even 3 years ago, you wouldn't have got as many sort of fans in team colours there to cheer on their team in the same way. You'd have far more neutrals. So that was brilliant. In terms of where the game was won and lost, I think United really benefited from that experience last year, because they just came out completely switched off to view anyway, to the emotion of it. Like, really, like, business-like performance, patient performance. They were so much more clinical and smart in the final third. Spurs really struggled in the final third. I mean, when you look at sort of the stats, no shots on target across the course of the game for Tottenham, 8 for Man United, 21 shots to 10, 31 touches in the box to 12. I mean, like, it's a world away from each other in terms of cutting edge and passing, etc. Like, there was just, I just felt Man United were really on it with their pressing game, with their passing game, and then the timing of the goals were really critical. So that goal coming just before the break, I think, really deflated Spurs at half time. And it would, any team, right? It always does. And then getting that third goal 2 minutes after the second, and the manner of that third goal with Becky Spencer's error, which is, you know, obviously heartbreaking for her. She's such a good player. That really was another key moment as well, because even at 2-0, you sort of thought, well, they've got a chance at getting back into this slightly, but when within 2 minutes of that 2-0 they're 3 down, then that's like the game is gone from you then at that point. So like, I feel like the goal on the stroke of half time, and then that third goal coming so soon after that second, was the real blow that just like sucked any wind out of Spurs' sails, which was, you know, sad, because it would have been nice to see a little bit more of a game, in a sense, like if you're a neutral and stuff. But I thought United were the best we've seen them this season in terms of like a really like business, like professional performance.
Such a Man United thing to do, isn't it? Turn up when it actually most matters. And look, I know Spurs will be frustrated with the defensive errors. Interesting from their manager, Robert Villaham, keen to take responsibility for that Becky Spencer error, saying, I'm taking that goal on me because that's how I want her to play. This is all just a bit of a learning curve, though, isn't it, Chris, for this team?
Absolutely. And it's funny because 40 minutes in, I was just talking to the woman next to me and saying, wouldn't it be fun if we nicked one before half time? Because the game was really poised. And then, you know, you could argue that Rachel Williams very cleverly blocks off Luana Bula. You know, you've got to give Ella Toon credit. That was a bit of a worldie. But yeah, absolutely, there's great learnings there. And I think, you having that experience, I guess, wants to make you have it more, if you see what I mean. And look, we've gone from a relegation battle this time last season to 76,000 people at Wembley. And exactly from what you've just said about what Robert said there, playing the way we play. And I think we've really enjoyed that this season. And it was interesting to hear the stats there, because obviously I haven't looked at them because, I can't bear it. But, no shots on target. Although, I heard the crossbar crack from Beth England's header.
It's not on target though, is it?
Oh, Susie!
I suppose not, Susie. I suppose not.
To be fair, in the presser, Robert said, "Oh, you don't count the crossbar as a shot on target," which made us all chuckle.
He's not wrong. And you know what? Robert and Vicky Jepson are great leaders. And Robert's getting, so many flowers, which he absolutely deserves. But I don't think we should underestimate the impact of Vicky either, who's an incredible coach and leader. And they seem to make a brilliant team. So it is exciting times because it's a young team. We've got an incredible on-pitch leader in Beth England who feels it all. You can see it sort of in her expression and is a real winner. And I did actually see the team after the game and they seemed in good spirits. So it sort of feels like the beginning of something rather than a sort of our one big hurrah or the pinnacle. So, it's tough. Of course it's tough. You never want to lose a match like that. But I do think we're on the cusp of something. We haven't reached the summit only to go back down, if you see what I mean.
You're on your journey.
Exactly.
Look, we have to talk about Ella Toon's goal. We've also got to talk about the impact that Rachel Williams has had this season and the fact that she was starting up front in this game. There were so many scoffs, weren't there, when she signed at the start of the season, but she's become such a crucial part of this Manchester United side, Susie.
Yeah, I mean, also ahead of the semi-final against Chelsea, right? I think I said on the podcast afterwards that as I was walking from the car to the ground, fans are going to me, "Skin her out, right? Skin her out. What's he doing starting a 36-year-old? Like, real, like, have you seen the team sheet kind of stuff? Like, not happy that Rachel Williams was starting up front against the holders of the cup and the, reigning league champions, which, is harsh at the best of times. But yeah, like, she's got an almost magnetic attraction to the ball, a low centre of gravity. She's got grit and fight and determination. She pulls players away from your wingers. She's like rapid for someone her age. I say her age being very, very close in age with some annoyance. But yeah, I mean, she's stepped up in every big moment for them pretty much. And the kind of performance against Chelsea showed that she was deserving of a start in the final. And I think it was no accident that she got that start after that performance and her contribution to that team performance in that win against Chelsea. Phenomenal player. And it's such a wonderful story, right? Like, former plasterer scoring at Wembley in a cup final at 36 is just, staggeringly good.
It's so funny, isn't it? Like, the total opposites of the former plasterer versus Ella Toon, come up from the ranks, a United fan herself. We've got to talk about that goal. Chris, you described it as a bit of a worldie. I'm going to pull you up on that. I think it's either a worldie or it's not. I think your Spurs was coming out a little bit there.
I know. I mean, it was a great goal. As soon as it left her boot, you were like, this is only going into the top corner. I was just hoping there would be a gust of wind that sent it off in another direction, but it wasn't to be, I'm afraid, sadly.
It wasn't. And Robin messaged us on X to say a solid half an hour on Toon's unbelievable goal would be nice if you talked about that when I pumped out for questions earlier on. Can't do half an hour on it, Robin, I'm afraid. But they say, watching as a neutral, it was a worthy cup-winning goal. I mean, listen, she's really struggled, hasn't she, for form at times this season and come on under for a little bit of criticism as well. But Wembley feels like her playground. That's how she's described it, hasn't she, before. You'll remember goals at Euro 2022 in the final, the finalissima for England as well. And for a childhood United fan, it was pretty special. But what is it about Wembley, Chris, do you reckon, that brings out the best in her?
She's obviously a big game player. And what's interesting is that, if you think about her, she can do that in games where she's sort of anonymous for huge periods and then just turns up and does something like that. And that's why you've got Ella Toone in your team. It's why there are several players like her across the men's and the women's games, where in some instances you might say, oh, they're a luxury. But then if you've got someone who can do that on that big stage and clearly does that at Wembley and is a big game player, then that's someone that you may want in your team. It was a hard watch, but it's also the sort of goal that you always remember that you were there. And it was, it was in front of the Spurs fans as well. So I was in a chat, I've been in various Spurs chats, as you can imagine. And there were some people who were literally behind that goal and felt like they were going to get it in the face, even from when the net came back. So, it was a world-class goal. There you go. Not a bit of a world-class goal, Faye, a world-class goal.
Well done. Thank you for conceding, Chris. I appreciate it. I'll let Ella know. You've given her the credit. Listen, Susie, just to wrap things up, we've talked about the future of Tottenham, which feels very, very exciting. Still feels a little bit uncertain in terms of the future of Manchester United, even with this fantastic victory. There's a lot of change going on at the club, and Mark Skinner was asked extensively in his press conference about his own future, because his contract's obviously up in the summer, and he said, I hope so, right? We've just created history and I've got to live in that moment. I believe in myself fully. I'm still a baby in terms of my career, so I've got lots to achieve in this game, but the club are in fantastic hands, and hopefully I'm here to be able to do that with them. Now, add in to the fact that the Manchester United new co-owner, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, opted not to be at Wembley on Sunday, instead going to the men's game against Arsenal at Old Trafford. What did you make of that decision from a key person involved in this new era of Manchester United? And what did you make of Mark Skinner's comments?
First one, I thought it was an absolute joke that Jim Ratcliffe was not at Wembley for that match. It contrasted so sharply with Daniel Levy and a load of Spurs legends, historic legends of the men's club, being at that game to be in that moment with their players. In a game that, let's face it, they were not likely to win, right? And then you've got Jim Ratcliffe at Old Trafford 5 hours before kick-off in what is a dead rubber for them, right? Yes, Arsenal in a title race, but United aren't. It's a meaningless game for Man United in that respect, and not at the cup final. It just sends a message of where your priorities lie. And obviously, no one is saying that, in the grand scheme of Manchester United, the women's team are going to be treated completely of equal value to the men's, when obviously the men's generate so much money. The Premier League is so significant. We know all that exists, but it's about the message you put out to the world about what you believe and how you feel about your women's team. And the idea that you're not there for its first major trophy, I think that just sends a terrible message, right? It's the same as, yes, they're playing at Old Trafford on the final day of the season in their game against Chelsea, the women's team, but they've played there twice this season. Now, I think that also sends a message. More and more clubs need to step up into their big stadiums because of the message that sends about how much you believe in your team, right? If you want fans to invest, you've got to invest, emotionally as well as just financially. Lip service and things isn't enough. And if he shows up to the final game at Old Trafford against Chelsea, that's great, but you've missed the team winning possibly the club's only major trophy this season and their first major trophy as a women's team. And I just think that's inexcusable and says a lot about the attitude that we might see moving forward. Hopefully it gives him a kick up the backside, because the backlash has been so severe online, but we'll see. In terms of Mark Skinner, it's really interesting, right? Because I spoke to a fan before the game for an article, Natalie, and she was saying, hope we win, it'd be great if we win, it'd be deserved if we win, but I don't want it to paper over the cracks this season, and I don't think it will. And I think that's true. I think there is still questions to be asked about Mark Skinner. I've always been a big admirer of him as a manager at Birmingham. Towards the end of his time in Orlando, I thought he was doing a great job. I've always advocated that he be given time at United to do his thing, but that there has to be questions asked at the end of this season, after last season, about the league form and maintaining a challenge and a lack of rotation and frustrated players leaving the club and those kind of things, it feels like it's happening too often that every player that leaves the club talks about how valued they feel elsewhere feels a little bit too much of a pattern. So if they give him a new contract, it's going to be interesting to see whether this trophy is enough authority to mean that he keeps players on his side and is able to do something, and the club invest as a whole, because I don't think it is just his fault, but I don't think it's necessarily shown us that he is the brilliant manager that a cup may well kind of give the illusion of as well. So I think him as a manager is still a little bit up in the air. United's future is still quite up in the air, and whether all those puzzle pieces come in together remains to be seen. That is the longest I don't know I've ever said.
It was a pretty long answer, but I think you covered off all of the salient points, and it is a real kind of moment, I would say, and I really hope it's a positive moment for Manchester United. I wasn't 100% sure on Sir Jim Radcliffe's message to the women's team via the Ineos shared on X. A proud and historic moment for the team that's testament to their grit, determination and team spirit. A wonderful achievement, many congratulations. That still feels like it's them and us. You're all one club. I just, say us maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being pernickety. Let us know what you think, especially Manchester United fans. It is really important to say, though, that co-owner Avram Glazer was himself at Wembley, because we've actually not mentioned that, and that's really quite vital, and a number of other Ineos personnel as well. So it wasn't as if they weren't representing at all. And maybe Sir Jim Radcliffe himself didn't necessarily need to be there. He's not, top dog, as it were, just yet. But anyway, let us know what you think, Manchester United fans. That's it for part 1. In part 2, we'll look ahead to the Barclays WSL finale. Arsenal say farewell to a club legend, and Serena Wiegmann announces her England squad for their next 2 Euro 2025 qualifiers. Welcome back to part 2 of the Guardian Women's Football Weekly. The Barclays WSL is hurtling towards its conclusion after another dramatic season. There are a few unmissable days ahead as well, kicking off at Brisbane Road on Wednesday night as Tottenham host Chelsea. Emma Hayes' side have had 10 days to prepare for this crucial game in hand, and a victory would send them to the top of the table, level on points with Manchester City going into the final day. Susie, how beneficial is that preparation time going to be, bearing in mind how packed their schedule's been over the last couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, they don't get much preparation time across the course of a season because of how many games they play and how late they go in competition. So I think it's going to be significant, particularly they're playing both FA Cup finalists who, will be exhausted emotionally and physically from that experience. But also that presents challenges in and of itself, right? Because Spurs, are going to want to give something back to their fans, finish the season on a high. It's a big home game for them off the back of, a crushing defeat. And then you've got them playing Man United and a team either riding on the crest of a wave, wanting to go out on the biggest of highs after a difficult league campaign, or really hungover. So, we'll see which one they face. But I imagine that, there's going to be 2 really tough ties for them, actually, because regardless of the cup final, they are not easy games.
No, they're definitely not. And how did Tottenham recover and refocus just 72 hours after the emotions of that cup final, Chris?
I think it's going to be buoyant. I think it might feel weird to be buoyant after a loss, but I think, the fact that we got there, and I reckon it's going to be the biggest turnout we've had at Brisbane Road ever. It's going to be our highest attendance, because off the back of it all, you've got more people wanting to go to the games. In order to have got a ticket to the cup final, you have to have had tickets to 2 games at Brisbane Road. So I think people will have bought those tickets. And regardless of the loss, I think there's a lot of pride in that team. So, as you say, there's going to be an atmosphere there that will be sort of exciting. Whether it's good enough to face Chelsea when they're at the business end of the season, where they've still got something to play for, because we've secured 6th spot now, I think, regardless of what happens. So I think it'll be a good game. We've never taken any points off Chelsea in the WSL, and I think that will be something that the team and us will want. So I guess we'll see, but I don't think it's going to be as straightforward as you might think, given what stuff has looked like in the past.
I mean, this season's just not straightforward, is it? I don't know why we're even trying to say it might be right at the end, because actually, whatever happens on Wednesday, the title's going down to the wire. Manchester City travel to Villa Park. Chelsea face a buoyant Manchester United at Old Trafford. And Susie, you kind of thought that Chelsea would have the upper hand last week, obviously given that second chance by Gareth Taylor's side after their defeat to Arsenal. Do you still feel the same, or are Manchester United going to spoil the party?
I do still feel the same. I think Man United have a really strong chance of spoiling the party, though. You know, they are going to be riding high and they're going to have their trophy at Old Trafford ready, present it around the pitch. They're going to want to do that after a win more than they are a defeat that hands someone else the title. They don't want two trophy presentations at Old Trafford that day, with one with Chelsea and one with them with the FA Cup round the pitch afterwards. So I do think it's going to be a real battle, but I just think Chelsea, the bit between their teeth, the amount of rest they've had, knowing that, you know, if they win it, as long as they've beaten Spurs in midweek, will give them the title. I just can't ever bet against Emma Hayes' side at this stage of the season.
Yeah, although actually, Chris, Manchester City are favourites still going into their finale against Aston Villa, but should Villa actually be underestimated, bearing in mind it's Carla Woold's final hurrah? There feels like too many trophy presentations and too many final hurrahs. I can't quite cope with it on the final day.
I imagine, as always, there are going to be many twists and turns. I know we're playing kind of cliche bingo here, but, you know, it's not going to be straightforward. And it's interesting as well, isn't it? Like, do Manchester United want to hand Manchester City the title on that one? There are so many sort of permutations of the things that, you know, people do or don't want. But I think I'm probably with Susie in the sense that, you know, this is where sort of Emma Hayes' teams shine, regardless of the injuries and all of the other things. You know, they've had this time. They were on for a quadruple and they're down to the final one. And I think it'll be a great surprise, particularly in her final season here in the WSL, to come away with nothing. And I think that won't necessarily feel like pressure for a team like Chelsea, or feel like a privilege and a gift to be able to give to her. So I think let's see. But again, don't underestimate Manchester City. But I think without Bunny Shaw, it's a little bit harder. I mean, I know they've got talent in abundance, but, you know, she's scored a lot of goals and been instrumental for them this season. And to lose her just at the end might just be a factor for them, I think.
Oh, God, devastating, isn't it, after such an incredible season? We shall see, and we'll be dissecting it all on next week's podcast. Right, Susie, you might want to grab yourself a box of tissues for this section. I feel like producer Ned should put some violin music in the background as we all put our hands on our hearts and take a nod to Vivianne Miedema. Arsenal have announced that she's going to leave the club when her contract runs out at the end of the season. She's spent 7 years with the Gunners and leaves as the all-time Barclays WSL record goal scorer, having netted 125 goals in 172 appearances. How you doing, Susie? Was it something you expected, or are you still in mourning? Wearing black today, I see.
Yeah, I've been avoiding all social media for the past 24 hours. No, I was expecting it. I actually knew it was coming. But yeah, I'm just gutted. It's like when Henri left Arsenal, you know, someone who wasn't sort of finished, you know, and is a club legend and probably going to another WSL side as well, which hurts all the more. So yeah, I'm just gutted. All of the rumours is that, you know, she wasn't offered a new contract and things like that, and I think that's appalling. I would have handed her the Emirates if she asked for it and said, here's the keys, you're in charge. I would have gone all out to keep her, because she's only 27. She's an absolutely phenomenal player. She's got so much more to give. Yes, obviously she's had the injury she's had, but for me, you build a team around her. You don't try and slot her into holes that she doesn't quite fit in, which I think has been the problem, in that, you know, when you've got Alessia Russo and Stina Blackstenius playing in the 9 and you're trying Vivianne Miedema in the 10, but then you've got, you know, really quality players coming through in the 10 as well that are more naturally suited to that position. Where do you fit her in that grand scheme of things? I understand all of that, but for me, you rip apart all of that and you put Viv Miedema's name in there and then you fit everything around her. Like, she's that kind of like generational talent, and she's still got so many more years at the top end of the game, and I'm like devastated that they are not going to be in an Arsenal shirt. Like, devastated. And I'm going to, after this, pretend it's not happening for another good while.
Well, I'm afraid it is happening, Susie. I'm afraid so. Chris, I'm sure you're delighted, and I know you're probably not one to heap praise on Arsenal players, but as a kind of WSL fan, as a women's football fan, as just a fan of really, really good players, is it even possible to sum up how much of an impact she's had during her time at the club?
I'm not sure it is. And actually, as much as I, am a diehard Spurs fan, this might be controversial to say, but I think, you've got to give Arsenal women all the credit that they're due for how they've developed women's football in this country. And you've said it at the top there with Viv Miedema's incredible goal scoring record. And I'm like Susie, I wasn't surprised to see it, I suppose, because you could sort of see it was coming, given what Susie just described about trying to sort of, fit her in around others. But actually, I'm with Susie on the sense that I would build a team around her. She is an incredible talent. And all of those goals belie the fact that she does more than just score goals. If you think about what that link-up play looks like, how she brings other people into the game, there's so much there. I'm happy, actually, that she's staying in the WSL because I think she's the kind of player that you want in the WSL. If I was an Arsenal fan, though, I'd be desperate for her to go abroad. But, actually, we need her in the WSL because she's exactly the kind of player that's going to help us kind of continue to develop the game. Obviously, I would love to see her at Spurs, but I know that's not at all possible or going to happen. But, all the props to her. And I think she's an incredible player. And I mean, I've always enjoyed watching her, whether it's been in a red and white shirt or not, because not only is she talented, but she's got that little bit of stardust and magic. She's not just the number 9 poacher in the box who's going to score a goal. There's stuff that comes out that you're like, oh, wow, how did she do that? Or where did that come from? She seems to sort of know instinctively where the ball's going to be and can produce things from it. So great that she's staying in the WSL. I actually quite like that she's leaving Arsenal because it means I can like her a bit more.
Well, let's see where she goes. Last bit of news this morning from Arsenal, actually. They've announced that the Emirates is going to be their main home from next season, which is great to hear. Yona Side will play at least 11 games, 8 of them the league matches, plus all their Champions League games if they reach the group stage, which after the absolute devastation of missing out on that this year, hopefully they will be able to do that. Right, finally, Sarina Wiegman has announced her England squad ahead of their double header against France. The Lionesses will host Hervé Renard's side in Newcastle on the 31st of May before travelling to St Etienne 4 days later as their Euro 2025 qualification campaign continues. Bearing in mind that I'm sunning myself in the Algarve, sorry Chris, I'm going to leave you with Susie and producer Sophie, who are both at Wembley to analyse who's in and who's out.
So there aren't really any surprises in the squad. Obviously, we've got Millie Bright back, which I think many of us were expecting. Rachel Daly is out because she's retired. But the only big name in is Aggie Beaver-Jones in her place. She's had such a phenomenal season. Why do you think she's so deserving of this call-up, Soph?
I think she's done it with Chelsea this season. And I think no one kind of expected her to have the kind of the breakthrough season that she has done with Chelsea. I think she's probably been helped a little bit by circumstance in terms of, the injuries that have happened within that Chelsea squad. It's given her maybe more opportunities to play than she has otherwise. But she's really made her mark, and that's all down to her. And I think from everyone that we talk to all over the game, they always praise how hardworking she is, how diligent she is, and how much she is really, really concentrating on being the ultimate professional. She's only 20 years old and she's having one of those breakout seasons at Chelsea, but also we saw what she did with Everton last year as well. That was kind of her first season properly in the Barclays WSL, and she really hit the ground running. And I still don't really know what her position is, like whether she's a full-on number 9 or whether she's better in the wing. I think that comes with time, but I think she's been performing in all areas of that kind of the park and getting the goals that are really important for Chelsea this season. You've seen it in the last 2 games; she got 4 goals. So, yeah, I think she's firmly put herself in Serena's mind.
Yeah, and we saw her in that February camp, didn't we, where she sort of stepped up from the under-23s just briefly to train with the senior side, and by all accounts they said she really impressed in that environment as well. So they know, because they work so closely, they sort of know exactly what they're getting from the players that come in from that under 23 squad as well. Obviously, one of the very interesting things, probably the most interesting thing from the squad announcement, was the talk around the calendar, because this is the first time we've had competitive qualifying matches in the off season for Women's Super League and many of the European leagues that play through the winter rather than the summer. So that's a really complicated thing for them to have to navigate. It's a really complicated schedule they've worked out to get the players ready for these camps. And one of the things that Serena was asked was, you know, whether she's okay with them going abroad in this little gap that they have before the fixtures in July. And, you know, she replied quite funnily that she doesn't really want them to travel to the other side of the world, but she trusts them as professional players. I mean, what do you make of it? It's like, it feels like a little bit of a really complicated jigsaw puzzle that we don't really know if it's going to work or not until they're into those games, right?
That's the thing, right? I mean, I think you know how I feel about this window in July, especially. Not so much the kind of May, June one. That kind of makes sense. It's just added on to the end of the season. But that July window is absolutely insane from my point of view. I don't understand why it's there and why it couldn't be put to September. I know we hate that September window generally, but it would make more sense when players aren't meant to be on holiday. And we talk so much about loading. We did that whole episode with FIFA, you know, a couple of weeks back about kind of the scheduling in the women's games and the need for these athletes to get a proper break. And it's just really, in a summer where for the England players, they've got the summer off. They should have the summer off. And they could have a really good, 4 or 5 weeks of proper rest. They're now having to think about how to juggle an England camp in the middle of July. And I would say for the other European teams, it's probably the same as well. The ones that are going to the Olympics, it's not ideal having to play competitive fixtures 10 days before the start of the Olympic Games. Those are the games where you want friendlies to, kind of ease yourself back in, getting the flow, but not having to go full pelt, full tackles. Risk of injury is higher. So yeah, it's really concerning for me, that window and how it's been put in. But then also it means it's a problem for all of these federations, right, to work out how to do it. And I know some people will say they need more time off, the players, but actually going cold, I think Emma Hayes said this the other week, going in cold is actually worse for them. They need to be in environments where they are training regularly, rather than having 3 weeks off and then coming in for a 10-day camp where they've not played any football or trained at the highest level or trained at the level that England need.
Yeah, I think the federations need to have more of a holistic approach to the FIFA windows, because that FIFA window in theory should be okay, because for the rest of the world, for many of the other continents, particularly the Americas who play in summer seasons, they need a window there potentially. It's in their season. It makes sense for them. It doesn't make sense for Europe or any of the other countries that play in a winter league. So either you need to have FIFA getting all of the calendars aligning across the world, bar a few exceptions for Scandinavian leagues who have to battle extreme winters or whatever. But you either need to FIFA to do that, or you need, say, UEFA to look at the FIFA calendar and go, it is not practical for us to play a window in July, so we're going to leave that one and then focus on the others. It needs some kind of someone to say, hang on a second, let's think of the players. But anyway, we did all of that last week.
Exactly. I really consider this on UEFA, and maybe that's from a very naive outside perspective, but they could have just gone, no, it's because they wanted to shoehorn this Nations League European qualification into such a short space of time that we're ending up with these 2 extra fixtures in July that have never really happened before. Yes, we got the World Cup last year and that calendar was messed up because of that, but there was a very clear reason why that was happening. This season, there's a much less clear reason why it's happening. And
it's meant that we've got this quite weird situation of Serena naming a squad to cover the 2 windows so that, as she said, the players have a bit of clarity on what their summer's going to look like, right? Because otherwise you've got players waiting for a July camp that they may not even be called up into. So I think that's quite smart to name the squad that covers the 2, but it's not ideal either. And then you've got these 4 players that are sort of back up on a sort of standby list ready to come in should anything happen in between, who are going to have to sort of be in limbo a little bit waiting. But, great quality players. It'll be lovely to see some of them come in actually, although that'd probably mean injury to some of the others. But you've got Liverpool's Missy Kearns, Tottenham's Jess Naz, Southampton goalkeeper Kayla Rendell, and Man United's Maya Letizia, who all have had really, really strong seasons. So that's also going to be great, isn't it?
I think it shows the development pathway as well, right? So when we were in Marbella back in February and the 2 camps were so lined up, the under-23s and the senior camp, and they were training together at times and they were living in the same hotel, and it kind of really points to that kind of matched upness between the two. And the fact that you've got, really good experience for Kayla, Jess, Maya and Missy Bo to come in, and they'll be training with the squad at St George's Park throughout. So they will be involved at points. They might not get game time, but they will be within that environment. And that will only go to serve them, going into the next year, whether they stay with the under-23s for a bit or go into the seniors or whatever happens. I think that experience will serve them greatly.
And I think that's all of the squad info ticked off.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much to Sophie and Susie. Susie, lovely to see you as always. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. When you get back from your holidays. I need a holiday.
Yes, you do need a holiday. Absolutely. Chris Paros, any holidays anytime soon?
Sadly not, but, have a lovely time.
Thanks. I need it before I head to Germany. So I've taken all the stick for missing the FA Cup final at Wembley on Sunday, but I did watch it from sunnier climes. But actually, I still think it was hotter at Wembley than it was here in Portugal, which is not necessarily what you want when you're away. But lovely to see you anyway. Thank you as well to Aoife Mannion for her contribution and for all of yours as well. Keep having your say by sending in your questions via X or emailing us at womensfootballweekly@theguardian.com. And as ever, a reminder to sign up for our bi-weekly women's football newsletter. All you need to do is search Moving the Goalpost, sign up. In Tuesday's edition, Denmark star Rika Savecki talks about the heart condition that forced her to retire from football at the start of the year. The Guardian Women's Football Weekly is produced by Sophie Downey and Ned Carter-Miles. Music composition was by Laura Iredale. Our executive producer is Sal Ahmat. Women's Football Weekly is supported by Google Pixel. With its incredible camera and AI-powered technology, Google Pixel is bringing fans closer to the game this summer. Search Google Store to find out more.
This is The Guardian.